Welcome back to this next episode of the Crypto Fatcat and the Crypto Skeptic. This is the reboot edition, Jonathan, kicking things back off after a brief pause. So bring us up to speed with what exactly is the big news in the crypto world?
Well, Bitcoin just hit an all-time high. We hit $111,000. Currently slightly pulled back from there, like around 105 or something like that. That's got to be the biggest news in the crypto world right now, for sure. There's lots of other things happening. State legislations are starting to move a little bit faster now. 3 different states have passed bills about Bitcoin being held as reserve. I don't think any of them have specified how much or how they would do it, so there's a long way to go with it. But at the same point, still, it's a sign of clear progress that we hadn't seen in the past. Also, I know the Bitcoin conference is coming up relatively soon. The Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, is going to be speaking at that conference. That seems like a big deal for the Bitcoin world. If you're worried about regulation and the like, it seems like it's probably a good sign. Things seem to be going pretty well in terms of Bitcoin and crypto in general, although more Bitcoin than crypto in general. Bitcoin itself has really been the flag bearer. The rest of crypto is sort of just trying to survive and wait for their moment in the sun.
Seems like the US government and some of the state governments are really happy to erode the US dollar's value as the kind of world reserve currency and do that through giving more legitimacy to Bitcoin, and also through running up massive deficits. You know, this bill that's going through right now is apparently going to add $5 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. And so that obviously undermines the value of the dollar and really kind of makes it seem possible that crypto, and Bitcoin in particular, could become that digital gold that people were sort of aspiring to be, 5 years ago, 2 years ago even. It seems more and more realistic, crazy as that sounds.
I mean, it doesn't sound crazy to me. I mean, at this point, what's the downside number for Bitcoin? I mean, certainly there are some scenarios where it goes to zero still, don't get me wrong. But there aren't very many anymore. There used to be a lot of scenarios where Bitcoin goes to zero. Now there's a few. So if we knock out the outlier scenarios, just like in the Olympics, you throw out the top score, you throw out the bottom score, you left with, and you average what's left in the middle. Like, what do we think is the floor for Bitcoin at this point? Like, unless some really extraordinary stuff happens, like black swan type events, we forget about those. What's the lowest Bitcoin's even going to go? I ask you as the skeptic or the more newer person to crypto and less invested, less sure of the whole thing. What do you think Bitcoin's floor is, assuming relatively normal world activities, not worldwide depression or anything?
Okay, first of all, just to be clear, I'm still a crypto skeptic of most of the altcoins as far as like my limited understanding of them. And this meme coin thing that's happening with
Well, sure.
Trump and the Melania coin and all of that stuff is just sheer speculative nonsense. I can't believe that it is accepted as widely as it seems to be accepted. So then as far as Bitcoin though, and it taking this sort of this digital gold role, it really does seem to be taking that role for a lot of people and funds now. And so honestly, I can't see it going much lower. Sure, something could happen in a macro economy where it dips down, there's a liquidity crisis and it dips down to 50,000, 40,000, who knows. As far as beyond that, in medium term, longer term, I can't see it going below 100 grand. It feels like it's at 100 grand right now.
Oh.
And most of the public isn't even interested in it. Most of the public still thinks it's a scam.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know. I think 50,000 is a pretty good floor. That's the number I was thinking of as I was asking the question, where I could see just more normal type events. Still, it ends up dragging itself all the way down to 50K. But that feels like the floor to me. And, that's pretty good. That's pretty strong. That's a $1 trillion valuation, market cap, I should say, of for Bitcoin all by itself at 50K. So yeah, that is not the same as what gold is supposed to be, right? Gold is supposed to be a true store of value where it isn't super volatile. We're still talking about some higher levels of volatility for Bitcoin, and I expect that for the near and midterm. But I think the band of volatility is really contracted now. And we're talking about something like 50K bottom. I don't know what the top is this time around. We could make up a number and maybe we will, but 150K, 200K, 250K, 125, who knows? But wherever that is. But it feels like it's a much tighter band than when it used to be, where we saw Bitcoin go to 20,000 and drop all the way down to 3,000. Bitcoin goes to 70,000, drops all the way down to 15. Bitcoin here at 100, if it was going to follow those kinds of numbers, might drop as low as, 25. But that does not feel very reasonable, notwithstanding extreme economic events.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't feel very reasonable. Let me ask you this, though. You were saying that there's some downside risks that you feel like you could push off the table now, and they're just not the same issue that they were previously. So what are those downside risks that you think don't exist in the same way anymore?
Well, the notion that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value has been a long-held anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin notion. And on one level, it doesn't have intrinsic value. That's true. Let's be clear. You can't take a Bitcoin and trade it for food if there was no currency going on, right? There's no value there, right? If there was no monetary system of any kind, no one would take that for
It's
food.
basically a digital spreadsheet that's got this great sort of security attached to it, and that a whole bunch of people have agreed has value because they're letting it play this role of digital gold because it was first to the race. It was sort of the first, however you want to describe that, and it's kind of got that status now, and it's hard to dislodge it as a result.
Yeah, the brand and network effect is really strong at this point. Like, even though people still think, a lot of people don't believe in it, but everyone knows what it is at this point. Everyone has even some general idea of what it actually is, instead of just that term people throw around. Like, almost everyone has some idea. They may not be able to articulate it well. They may deeply misunderstand it. I think that's probably true for a lot of people, but they kind of know what it is at this point, right? Like, it's starting to make some level of sense on a worldwide cultural level, at least on the industrialized world. That's a big change. It feels like the network effects are too strong, the brand is too strong for it to just disappear at this point. And so long people are calling it like tulips, which was a 6-month craze once. And this is now, we're on 16 years of Bitcoin essentially being just the best performing asset in the world in almost any time period within the last 16 years, give or take. Like, I don't think they've been comparable for a long time, but there was always sort of, for me, a concern of maybe something else can still replace it. Maybe something will be better than it as a store of value. And that, while other things may have better qualities than it, I think at this point, it's such a powerful brand, and the network effects are so strong, and its security record is now long enough that it's hard for something to replace it as this place to just safely put money, and over the long haul anyway, feel really, really good about. Now, obviously, a lot of people don't feel that way. I understand. But the people who own it, and there's a lot of people who own it now, and a lot of very wealthy people who own it, do feel that way, much more so than they used to. So, yeah, I think there's just this sense of, I just think if Bitcoin gets a certain prices, other people are just always going to buy it up now, at least for the foreseeable future, the next 5 years. Who knows what the world's going to bring us with AI and everything else eventually down the line, quantum computing, et cetera. But any kind of reasonable timeline, even mid to somewhat long term, it feels like a relatively safe investment, which I always felt it was just the safest of my extremely risky investments in the past. I don't feel that way anymore. Now I own some Bitcoin, and my thought is how much of this do I really want to sell? I kind of don't want to sell it. I just want to hold on to it because it just feels like all it ever does is appreciate in value if you zoom out enough. Obviously in any 1 year or year and a half, that's not true. But as soon as you're at any kind of 3-4 year timeline, any 3 or 4 year timeline for it, it always has appreciated massively in that timeline, essentially.
Well, there's been a huge shift since our first podcast as far as the acceptance of Bitcoin in particular. So now you can put it into your retirement fund,
right,
through Fidelity or BlackRock or through one of the kind of big funds, right? That was a huge shift. And then it feels like what's happened in the last year is we've seen this major move in gold, where gold has gone from, under 2,000 an ounce to over 3,000 an ounce. At the same time, we've got this sort of new administration who's doing some quite controversial, risky things around the tariffs and around,
Mm-hmm.
the last administration around freezing some of that Russian money, $500 billion or 300 and something $1 billion of their funds that were frozen internationally. And now you have this huge budget bill where the U.S. deficit seems it's possible it's going to explode even further. So that basically puts gold is going way up. U.S. Treasuries are becoming a little bit more risky, and it seems like they're having a harder time selling those U.S. Treasuries on the international market. There's some tremors happening there. So what do you do as far as if you're a foreign government or you're a huge business and you have hundreds of billions of dollars, or billions of dollars anyways, that you want to protect from inflation? Well, previously you'd buy U.S. Treasuries. And now, well, if you're China, do you want to put all of your money into U.S. Treasuries and potentially where there's a conflict and that money is frozen in the future? No, you probably don't. So you
Yeah.
have nations that are buying up all this gold. And I think some of those nations are looking at Bitcoin as a possible store of value as well. And so
It's
even if a small portion of that funds go into Bitcoin, it's frankly, I'm kind of surprised that we're still at this $100,000 level and not at 150 or higher.
I mean, I think if we hadn't had the last 3 months and change of this tariff, volatility in the global economy, we might be much higher than we would be. Like, we still hit an all-time high in Bitcoin, even with that, which is, I think, a sign of how strong it really is right now, because everyone's been freaking out basically about the tariffs. Like, the stock market's basically gotten back to where it was pre-tariffs now. It just sort of got back there. But Bitcoin's at an all-time high and is probably 25% higher than where it was 3 months ago, give or take, right? Like, it's a noticeable difference. So I think that's coming. I agree with you. I think that gold makes sense for a lot of countries, and if gold makes sense, Bitcoin makes a lot of sense for a lot of these countries too. One, because there's upside with Bitcoin that there isn't with gold, right? Gold is more safe because it's got a 5,000-year history of value, which Bitcoin certainly doesn't have, and it's going to take a while to get that. But gold does not have the best performing asset of the last 15 years or anything close to it. Gold has recently gone up, but if you look at it from 2010, it's basically doubled in price. Bitcoin since 2010 has done, I mean, I don't even know what the numbers are at this point. Bitcoin in 2010, Bitcoin was under $1. It's at over 100,000 right now. Like, that's a fairly extreme thing, but we can take other points in time and still see unbelievable. When I first started buying Bitcoin in 2014, it was $250 a Bitcoin, $10,000 right now. I mean, it's not, these are unbelievable opportunities to appreciate. And you can see the path for Bitcoin, how it could get more valuable, right? There's only so much Bitcoin in the world. There will never be more. And if countries want it, they will have to buy it, and that will drive the price up because supply will not go up with demand. Unlike with gold, to some degree, supply does go up with demand with gold, right? Because you can dig for more if there's more demand. Also, of course, storage of gold is challenging, extremely challenging. Transportation of gold is extremely challenging. You have to worry about counterfeitability with gold, which is a common problem, even though it's often talked about as not. Things that are stamped 24 carats can be 18 carats. Companies will stamp better companies on their gold to sell it for more. These are all issues, real issues. You don't custody it yourself unless you're the biggest countries in the world, essentially, right? Like, you have to trust someone else to custody it and give it to you when you want. These are all problems that you just don't have with Bitcoin. None of those things are problems with Bitcoin at all. You can instantly transfer it anywhere you want. It's portable. Storage is simple. You have full power over it, full custody over it. It can't be counterfeited. That's very powerful. And it has extreme upside compared to gold. I expect we are going to see a gold rush, but a Bitcoin rush at some point in the next 18 to 24 months for some of these companies and countries, actually. I was going to say countries, but both, really. I'm surprised we haven't seen it yet. And I am thinking possibly the tariff stuff has been part of it. Like, the fact that the United States now is clearly saying, we're here and we're supporting crypto in a way we never have before. And we planned on doing that for at least this administration's term. And I expect, even if this administration doesn't make it past the next term, let's say in 2028, you get Democrats in again, I imagine enough of this will be well worn that there won't be a massive rollback on crypto policy for something like Bitcoin anyway. Maybe for some of the more crazy meme coin stuff, they'll regulate it more harshly. But Bitcoin, I think, will be way too far deep into the world and the banking system at that point to do anything close to that. So I think there's still tremendous, unbelievable upside in Bitcoin. And I expect we're going to see this musical chairs played out in real time over the next 2 years.
What does that musical chairs potentially look like?
I mean, people not wanting to be left without a place to sit down. Like how do I make sure I get the Bitcoin before the price goes truly insane? Like it's easy to sit back if you're a company like Panama, and you're like, boy, we should get some of this. I wish we were El Salvador. Everyone made fun of them, but they bought it at $20,000, and as high as 50,000, and it's done very well for them, and they are doing extremely well now. And they went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to doing much better. I don't know exactly how much better, but better, and still with all this upside. Like, so 100,000 feels expensive, but if it's going to go to 500,000 or 200,000 even in the next few years, that's a better investment than we can make anywhere else anyway. So the fact that it has that, like, you don't want to wait until it's 200,000. You get half the Bitcoin you get right now, right? If you're Panama and you only have so much, you have $100 million to throw at this, let's say. I'm just making up numbers here. So I think as there starts to become this true rush, you're going to see the wealthy who have yet to get involved be more interested in getting involved. You're going to see companies who have yet to get involved really want to get involved. Someone like Apple, I think it's almost reckless of them with their 100 or 200 billion, I think it's $200 billion in cash they're sitting on, not to throw like $500 million at Bitcoin. Why wouldn't you if you're Apple? It's crazy that they wouldn't do that to me. It's a nice insurance policy. And if they're wrong, it costs them nothing. Like, it's meaningless to them. It's 0.25% of their available cash. Forget about everything else. It's just nothing. So I expect we're going to start to see some of the bigger companies and maybe smaller companies too start to do this more. I've been saying this for a while, but boy, it feels like the primer is pumped, the pump is primed. One of those words in one of those orders. That feels like we're really right there. And it feels like we're on the cusp of this. And of course, countries in the same way. We're seeing this at the state level in the United States. I certainly expect to see it at the national level too, not just in this country, but in many countries, like we've started to see. But I think that's going to pick up. And once it starts going, once the snowball starts rolling down the hill, it gets big fast. It just starts accumulating, and suddenly it can wreck a town. And like, we're still near the top of the hill with this ball. But like, this is the time, man. If you're a country, this is the time to get in. I mean, I've been saying this forever, but I've always been right. Like, if Bitcoin used to cost a lot less than it costs now, I think we're still going to be saying that a year from now. Wow, what if they could have gotten it at 100K? Like, what a deal that would have been for them,
The last time you said this is the time, Bitcoin was at $12,000.
Ooh, is that true?
Last time you said it so clearly to me, yes.
Wow. Okay, that feels good. And when was that? So that was like 2022 or something? Oh, okay.
I think it was
so yes,
2020. Yeah, I think it was post-pandemic. And it had gone down.
Yeah.
Post-pandemic, I think it had gone down to 3,000, and then it had gone back up to 12,000. So for those of us who were skeptics like myself, 12,000 looked expensive because I was looking at the 3,000. I was like, it was 3,000 only a few months ago. It seems crazy to pay 12,000 for it.
You skeptics always have a reason not to buy. Oh, it's down, so I don't want to buy it because I can't trust it. Oh, it's up, now it's pricey, I don't want to buy it. Always a reason, right? Like, it's just a way not to buy and miss out on. I mean, it's a way to miss out on the upside, right? Which is what happens to almost everyone who has this point of view. And it's okay. We all do it differently. It took you a while to get involved. It cost you some value, but you did get involved and you've still done very well. I would say extremely well, right?
On a very small scale, dipping my toe in, yes. But I'm still skeptical of, like, let's say, all these altcoins, and that skepticism has served me well because, let's say if there was someone who was in the Trump universe who bought the Trump coin or the Melania coin, those coins were basic pump and dump schemes where you had insiders who bought hundreds of millions of dollars of coins. They sold and took that upside within a couple of days of them being released to the public, or within a really short period of time, and they've dropped 80-90%. So the vast majority of investors, anybody who wasn't an insider, it's very likely that they lost 80-90% of their money. And I get that Bitcoin is in a different category, but the volatility over time, if you looked at those really high ups and downs, It kind of, if you're a more conservative investor, makes sense to be concerned or skeptical. So let's take a moment to talk about those downside risks that exist now. What do you see those as?
Do you mean for crypto in general or for Bitcoin?
Bitcoin in particular. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, the only obvious downside risks to me are, your basic quantum computing comes faster than expected and security is broken. That's always the biggest risk, right? If security gets broken on Bitcoin and anyone can just take any money and counterfeit it and hack into it, which has never happened and essentially is impossible to do based on the math of it. And it's easy to look up this stuff, watch really cool videos on how unbelievably hard it is. Quantum computing will make that easier, but of course, it's easy to defeat that if you can just add a few more characters to the string, the Bitcoin string addresses, and then that makes it the factorial on those numbers becomes again just impossible even for quantum computing, right? Until we get to next levels of that. So you can always defeat that. Maybe some new technology will change that way down the road, but that is the one true, always the one true massive issue potentially. But that's true for banks too, and like the way they keep everything electronically, right? Like if someone goes in and wipes all the bank's records and like everyone has zero now, like I don't know what the bank's supposed to do about that if they don't have any record of how much money everyone's supposed to have, like what the answer is. It isn't like they keep it all in a vault and have everyone's name as, in like a little Sean Fitzgerald, cubby and have it's $8,000 in there. Like, well, this is Sean's, right? That's not at all what they do. They don't even keep much money in their bank. They just push it all around and keep a good ledger also. They're keeping a ledger too, just like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just cleaner and more trustworthy and verified and transparent. So anyway, that's the biggest, most obvious downside. I guess we could still get to a point where governments ban it. It feels like that horse has left the barn at this point years ago. But I guess I'm sometimes surprised by what happens in the world. I guess there's versions where it feels like, if anything, we're going completely the other direction at this point, right? The United States feels full steam ahead. Most other countries feel some level of steam ahead too. No one seems to be attacking Bitcoin anymore. No one seems to be banning it. India used to do it like once every 6 months and then unban it. Even they've sort of chilled out on that. Doesn't feel like it's a big thing, but you never know. Like political headwinds can change. And I guess there's some level of threat there too. Besides that, at this point, boy, I don't even know. I can't really come up with any other obvious downside. Can you? You're the skeptic. What else can you think of?
I mean, if the US did start to lose their place as the reserve currency of the world, I could see there being a currency crisis that leads to all sorts of sort of transformational changes. It could be changes in government and who's in power, and there could then be major policy shifts that happen as a result of that. And one of those things could be to, if Bitcoin starts becoming an alternative, much like gold and perhaps some other currencies as well, then that could be under attack at that point in time. It does seem like it's a kind of a long shot scenario. And it also seems like even if they were to do that, what kind of impact could they have? Certainly in the lead up to that, I would imagine if there was a currency crisis, Bitcoin's potentially going to go through the roof in that medium term. And then like India's banned it, China's banned mining of it, and it doesn't seem like it's been just a minor blip as far as how it's affected the price, if it's affected it at all. I mean, a country as big as the US, financially as big as the US, if it was to ban Bitcoin, I assume it would have a much bigger impact. But for people who already owned it and who saw it as a continued store of value, why would they sell under those conditions unless there was, threat of real serious government action? If you were somehow, you had a record on Binance or Coinbase where they had your name and it was like, we know that you've bought this and we need you to, whatever, transfer it to us and we're going to give you this low amount for it, much like what happened in the financial crisis. Yeah. Where it was like, okay, you could say it, but I was thinking of like banks in countries like Cyprus where they failed during the financial crisis. They would say, hey, we're taking your money. We're going to give you back 10%, so you're going to lose your million. We'll give you 100,000, that type of a thing.
The difference, of course, is with crypto, if you're doing it right, they can't take your money, right? They can demand your money from you. They can say, we want
Right.
you to give it to us, but they don't already have access to it. You're the only one who has access to it. The
Yeah.
sovereignty is one of the things really powerful here. I do agree with you too that in the more outlier scenarios like you're talking about of like US is no, or the US, the dollar is no longer the world reserve currency, which could really happen, right? That's not impossible based on the way things have been going and continue to look like they're going. That is mostly a positive event for the value of Bitcoin. If you told me that was happening, I would say, God, Bitcoin might be at 500K. Like, it feels like it's much more likely to go up than down. Not to say there aren't scenarios where that would go down too, and maybe it could, because there's so much volatility with that situation, and who, like you said, who would be in charge. It's a little less clear. But I am a betting man. If you told me that was coming in the next year, I would not be like, let me sell my Bitcoin right now. I'd be like, let me acquire more Bitcoin right now, because I'm just going to be like, my wealth is likely to explode in that scenario. Like, I would think Bitcoin's going to do very well. It's got a shot to be the world reserve currency, but even failing that, being the one thing that people can actually trust is not getting inflated, which is one of the big problems with the dollar being the world reserve currency right now, is so powerful. It's the one thing. It's the only like currency that a lot of people in countries will accept, that there's an actual supply cap on. Everybody else just prints whatever they want of their currency, right? Because that's having the money printer is really powerful, until you inflate yourself into oblivion, which is what we have been and continue to do slowly.
Yeah. Yeah. That is definitely a great thing for gold. And now it seems for Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
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 The
And
quantum computing piece, I'd be
yeah.
curious about, like, if you're, for example, the Chinese government and you're wanting to get away from US treasuries and you have all this excess capital because you have this big trade surplus, what do you do with all that money? And sure, you buy gold, but how much gold can you get your hands on? That's an issue with the supply being limited. Um, and but if you're someone like the Chinese government and you're also working on developing quantum computing, I do wonder, sometimes you read these articles about advances in quantum computing and how close we are to it. And so, do they have in their mind, like, oh, potentially, someone achieves this quantum computing and can break the encryption. And it only has to happen once. Like you said, even if they can add zeros and even if they can sort of like bulletproof it for the current generation of quantum computing, if they are able to, someone's able to use quantum computing to break the encryption, steal a bunch of Bitcoin, it could have a dramatic crashing effect on the value of it. So if you're someone who owns hundreds of billions of dollars of this stuff, or tens of billions of dollars, that potentially it goes down, 90% within 2 days or something like that, because it's so liquid.
Yeah. I mean, the short-term impact would be huge for sure, but I don't think the long-term impact, if it only happened once and then they fixed it, would be as big a deal as you're saying. Like, look at all the data hacks that happen to these credit card companies, and it's a big deal for a day, and then everyone just moves on and forgets about it. Wells Fargo got caught, doing all these fake customer accounts, opening 10 accounts for each customer so they could get all this extra stuff, and most people didn't even leave them when they found out. They just, like, momentum and inertia are part of this. A. B, it's weird, right? If somebody uses quantum computing to steal Bitcoin, they actually have to do it quietly, right? Because if anyone finds out, the threat is Bitcoin would go to zero. I don't know that, and then what was the point of stealing in the first place? Like, I stole it, like, unless you're trying to destroy Bitcoin, why would you even do it, right? Like, if anything, you'd want to come up with something where in the transaction fees, you get like, one tiny little piece that is unnoticeable, essentially, like so little that no one on either side, would notice when it's getting transferred from one account to the other, one wallet to another, because there's a slight transaction fee you pay in Bitcoin to the Bitcoin network. You'd slice off a little bit of that for yourself, but so little that no one would notice. Otherwise, you're going to blow the price of Bitcoin, and what's the point of stealing it in the first place? Like, so it's actually a problem even for thieves in theory. Even if they could do it, you have to do it in such a way that you don't make it valueless to yourself, unless your entire aim is to destroy Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network, which A, I don't think they can do it if they wanted to, but B, Most people that wouldn't be their aim. Maybe the banking sector, that would be their aim. But they're about to get in bed with all this stuff anyway. They're right on the verge of getting in bed with all of it. So I don't know. These seem like not very likely downsides is what
Correct.
I'm getting to.
Agreed. Yeah, it seems like they're very long shot type scenarios,
Yeah.
black swan type events.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you wouldn't want to have 90% of your net worth in crypto were one of these black swans events to happen. And that's the beauty of diversification, where if you have some of your money in stocks or in gold or in real estate, that you should be in a more protected place. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it all depends what your financial goals are, right? What your investment goals are. If you're trying to grow and you're trying to be aggressive and be quick, then I would strongly disagree with the diversification idea, right? Like diversification is for people who aren't trying to get rich. They're trying to protect and grow slowly. And that's a perfectly fine investment goal. But that's really different than, I have this much money and I want to turn it into that much money. I want to turn it into a mountain of cash in the next 10 years. I want to change my life and my family's lives. If you're not already well-to-do, this is still one of the ways that is possible for people to do it, right? Like getting in on crypto. That's not that there's upside there that there just isn't with most stocks and most other financial investments.
Yeah, let's finish with how much upside you see there being in the next 5 to 10 years in Bitcoin, right? So, you've already talked about like how it could go up to 200,000. Could it go to 250? Is there a situation where the US dollar is no longer the world reserve currency and people start using Bitcoin more for that role and it goes up to 500,000? Well, if it goes up to 200K, we're now at less than 2x. Fantastic. That's what you could get. If you were getting 7% a year, you double your money in 10 years. Well, potentially with Bitcoin, you could double your money this year or next year, right? So it could happen in the sort of the shorter term.
A lot better, right?
Yeah, it is a lot better, but it's not. We're not at the place where you're buying Bitcoin for $250 and it's turning into $100,000. Do you want to take on that level of? Do you want to take on that level of risk for 2xing potentially in the next 3 years?
But you want to have it both ways, don't you? You want to have the safety of Bitcoin and have it already have established itself as $1 trillion asset because you're shitting on all the other cryptos, right? You're lumping together, I should say, Ethereum and meme coins. To you, it's all alt crap, right? You don't want anything to do with it. Those are the cheap ones right now, right? Those are the ones that haven't exploded yet. But it doesn't even occur to you that maybe there might be some value there. I think there is. So you want the safety and like certainty and gold standard of Bitcoin, but you want it at the prices when it wasn't the gold standard, right? That's a little unfair. I would say that, and also, by the way, the idea of, I can only double in a year, what would otherwise take me 10 years. What's the difference? That's a 10x difference. That's extraordinary. That's any investment person in the world, any financial person in the world would kill to double in 1 year instead of 10 years. That is a superpower that almost no one has. So to poo-poo that and act like that's not a big deal shows sort of how spoiled you are. When you got in at the price of the amount you put in Bitcoin, whatever that, however small that may be, has more than doubled. And that's been less than a year, I believe. That should be better than any other investment you made, unless you made some very, very lucky investment, right? I would say if we're looking at upside scenarios for Bitcoin in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years. Let's do 5 years first. I expect it's 2025. By 2030, Bitcoin will have hit $500,000. I'd be very surprised if it does. I expect by 2035, Bitcoin will have hit $1 million. I don't know that with either one of those, of course, but I think there still is that kind of upside. So I would say 10 years from now, I think there still is potential as much as a 10x available. That would be amazing. I hope that's true. But I'm also very comfortable with that not working out, and if Bitcoin finds a nice, comfortable place at 175,000 per BTC or 225,000, that's pretty good too. And even if you get in right now and 4 years from now, it's at 225,000, that's better than almost any other investment you can make, right? With potential upside. I would also argue Ethereum is a significant, important player in the crypto universe and is I would say extremely undervalued right now at something like $2,500 per Ethereum, where Bitcoin has hit its all-time high. Ethereum is almost at just a little over half its all-time high. And I think there's huge upside right now for Ethereum. Now, there's a little more risk, of course, because if there wasn't that risk, the price would probably be higher, right? Like you're basically, you trade upside for safety. That's what all of this is, right? So if you feel like Bitcoin doesn't have the upside, well, you have to give up a little of the safety to get more upside, right? Take on a little more risk. I think Ethereum is a really nice sweet spot for very nice upside with still pretty strong safety too. Ethereum's at 25, 2,600 right now. I mean, I can't see the future. I'm not saying this is not financial advice, but if you're just asking me where I see it being, I mean, I think by the end of the year it could hit an all-time high. I think by the end of next year it could be over $7,000, $8,000 pretty reasonably. That's a 3x from here. And I think if we're talking about further down the line, 5 years from now, if Ethereum wins the smart contract battle, which it is winning, but there's always new competitors for that, but it is winning. If it truly wins for real and for true, and everything is built on that the way it has been so far, everything continues to be built on that. And the bigger financial systems, the Visas of the world, built exclusively on Ethereum, which so far they have been, but they have to keep doing that. I mean, Ethereum at $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 each doesn't sound crazy to me at all. And now we're talking about there's your 20x type upside in 5 to 10 years, while still getting relative amounts of safety compared to most of, like something like a meme coin, which has no value. It's just ridiculous. Ethereum has a real place in the world. It really does things. It matters. I use it every day. I spend Ethereum every day, use the Ethereum network every day to transact. It has real value to me. And that's not just me. It has value to millions and millions of people in the world. So I don't think it's fair to say, well, now that Bitcoin's safe, where's the upside when you, even as you acknowledge it could double in the next year? That feels like completely unfair and the kind of standards that nothing else is ever being held to. I think we should all be thrilled to get something that we think is safe or almost completely safe, near safe, and still could double in a year. That sounds like the best investment of our lifetimes instead of anything else. All we really should be looking at is risk-adjusted return, right? Whatever that is. I would argue, I think actually Ethereum probably has the best risk-adjusted return right now, but Bitcoin has an excellent risk-adjusted return as well. So if you prefer more safety, great. Bitcoin's for you. If you prefer a little more rolling of the dice and it could not work out, but you like more upside, I think Ethereum is a great secondary buy or even primary buy. I mean, I own more Bitcoin than Ethereum by a significant amount, but I own enough Ethereum that, like, were it to hit big from here, I'm going to be very happy.
You make some excellent points, and I agree with you. It is unfair to kind of hold Bitcoin to two different standards, one of which is it's more accepted and it's safer now because of all the players who are invested in it and because of the place that it has in the financial world. And also say, oh, but that, doesn't have as much upside as it once had. And so, I agree with you. I think you make some good points to wrap things up there. And I think next time we can focus on the differences between the Melania coin and Ethereum and why Ethereum might actually be more valuable.
It might be.
Great. All right. That's all for now.
Melania coin. I didn't even know that existed.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
I don't follow that stuff.